Stop scrolling immediately because this story didn't just crack open. It blew the vault door clean off. Just when Hollywood thought it had duct taped the Diddy situation shut, Katt Williams showed up like a walking truth serum and said, "Nah, we're doing names today.
Not hints.
Not riddles, names, 7 of them." And suddenly the same industry that loves silence started choking on it. What makes this hit harder? Katt didn't just talk. He validated the loudest voice everyone mocked for years. According to him, 50 Cent wasn't paranoid, wasn't trolling, and wasn't reaching. He was early. And being early in Hollywood is more dangerous than being wrong. This makes the Kardashians look like a PTA meeting. Because what's being exposed here isn't gossip. It's coordination. Once Katt said the words, "setup," the internet froze. Then it erupted. Because if even half of this is true, then the fall of Diddy wasn't random. It was orchestrated. And when powerful people start suspecting betrayal from the inside, that's when panic spreads. This wasn't a joke, and it definitely wasn't a misunderstanding. The moment Katt Williams opened his mouth and claimed that 7 celebrities helped set up Diddy, the atmosphere shifted from gossip to something far more uncomfortable. This didn't sound like a comedian riffing for laughs. It sounded like someone who'd stopped caring about industry, politeness, and decided the quiet part was overdue for a microphone. Hollywood thrives on vagueness, but Katt didn't speak in riddles. He spoke in structure. And structure is what made people nervous, because once you introduce a number, you introduce intention. 7 doesn't feel random. 7 feels counted, planned, deliberate. And that's when the internet stopped laughing and started listening. This wasn't framed as a downfall caused by bad luck or isolated mistakes. It was framed as something far more strategic. A setup, allegedly carried out by people close enough to benefit when the tide turned. That implication alone was enough to flip the entire conversation upside down. What made this hit even harder was how Katt framed the past. According to him, 50 Cent wasn't trolling paranoid or chasing clout when he spent years warning people about Diddy. He was early. And in Hollywood, being early is a curse. Early truth tellers always look crazy until the timeline catches up, and once it does, everyone pretends they saw it coming. Katt didn't just back 50 Cent, he vindicated him. And that recontextualized years of jokes, side eyes, and dismissive laughter as something much darker. Suddenly, old interviews felt prophetic. Tweets that once seemed petty started looking pointed. People went back through archived clips, stacking moments together like evidence in a case nobody thought would ever be tried. The narrative quietly shifted from Diddy's in trouble to who stopped protecting him and why. Because that's the real currency in Hollywood, protection. Talent gets you in the door. Protection keeps you there. And once protection disappears, the fall doesn't feel accidental anymore. Katt Williams didn't accuse from the outside. He spoke like someone who understands the ecosystem. Hollywood doesn't usually destroy its own overnight. It slowly withdraws support. Invitations stop coming. Calls stop getting returned. Allies go quiet. And then, when the moment is right, everyone pretends the collapse was inevitable. That's the pattern Katt was pointing at. Not a spontaneous implosion, but a coordinated silence that allowed everything to cave in. The timing of his comments mattered too. This didn't come when Diddy was untouchable. It came when the armor was already cracking, when allegations were circulating, and when silence had become louder than denial. That's when insiders talk, not to start the fire, but to make sure they're not standing in it when it spreads. Katt didn't ignite the controversy.
He reframed it, and the industry response was telling.
There were no loud denials. No coordinated pushback. Just carefully worded statements, vague posts about letting the truth come out, and a whole lot of nothing from people who usually rush to defend their own. Silence isn't neutral in Hollywood. Silence means conversations are happening privately. Lawyers are involved, and everyone is checking where they stand before choosing a side. Silence is self-preservation. What really unsettled people was how believable the allegation felt. Hollywood history is filled with examples of loyalty lasting only as long as the benefits outweigh the risks. Once someone becomes a liability instead of an asset, the exit is rarely loud. It's negotiated. And once the support system collapses, the fall looks sudden from the outside even though it's been months in the making behind closed doors. That's why Katt's words landed. They matched patterns people had seen before but didn't like acknowledging. As soon as the 7 celebs line hit the timeline, speculation went nuclear. Comment sections turned into guessing games nobody wanted to win. Every celebrity who had ever distanced themselves from Diddy suddenly found their silence re-examined. Was it foresight? Self-protection? Or something more involved? Allegations like this don't just accuse one person. They contaminate the entire room. Once the idea of betrayal enters the chat, trust evaporates. And then there was the panic response. Some celebrities rushed to post unrelated positivity. Others suddenly emphasized long-standing independence from Diddy. A few went completely quiet. None of that went unnoticed. Because when an industry built on image control starts behaving inconsistently, people notice patterns even where none are confirmed. The optics alone were enough to fuel paranoia. The most dangerous part of Katt's claim wasn't the names. He didn't say. It was the system he described. A system where downfall isn't always about wrongdoing, but about timing, leverage, and who benefits from the collapse. A system where being powerful doesn't protect you forever, it just delays the moment when protection is withdrawn. And if that's true, then Diddy's situation isn't unique. It's instructional. That's why the phrase, 50 Cent was right, echoed so loudly. It wasn't just about one person being vindicated. It was about acknowledging that warning signs were there, dismissed because they were inconvenient. Because listening would have meant questioning the system itself. And questioning the system is dangerous when you still depend on it. By the end of this phase, the conversation had completely shifted. This was no longer about isolated allegations or messy headlines. It was about whether Hollywood orchestrates exits as quietly as it orchestrates success. About whether loyalty is real or rented. And about whether the next person to fall is already being discussed in rooms the public will never see. If Katt Williams was right, even partially, then this wasn't just a scandal. It was a blueprint. A reminder that in Hollywood, the most dangerous moment isn't when the spotlight turns on you, but when the people who once stood in it with you step away all at once. And if this was only the beginning of the roll call, the real shock wasn't who had already fallen. The moment Katt Williams' words finished circulating, Hollywood didn't react. It froze. And that pause said more than any denial ever could. Because when an industry that lives off instant statements suddenly goes quiet, it's never confusion. It's calculation. This is the stage where panic doesn't scream. It moves silently, checking exits, scanning allies, and deleting old group chats in real time. As soon as the phrase 7 celebs embedded itself into the narrative, the internet did what it does best. It turned into a crowdsourced investigation unit with absolutely no badge and unlimited confidence. Comment sections exploded into theory factories. Every old clip involving Diddy got replayed like it was evidence in a trial that hadn't been announced yet. Interviews that once felt harmless were suddenly telling. Casual jokes were reframed as foreshadowing. Even silence from certain celebrities became suspicious, because in moments like this, not speaking is treated like a confession written in invisible ink. Memes took over next. Because memes are how the internet processes fear without admitting it's scared. Hollywood Hunger Games, jokes flew everywhere. People compared the situation to a Game of Thrones-style betrayal arc, where allies quietly sharpened knives while smiling for cameras. It made the Kardashians look like a group project with shared Google Docs. Because this chaos felt layered, strategic, and deeply uncomfortable. What really pushed the story into overdrive was how Katt's claim reframed years of behavior. Suddenly, 50 Cent wasn't the petty instigator people mocked him as. He became the guy who saw the smoke early and yelled fire while everyone laughed. The internet loves a delayed vindication arc, and this one hit like a plot twist nobody wanted but couldn't ignore. Old tweets resurfaced. Old interviews got stitched together. People started saying the most dangerous sentence in celebrity culture. What if he was right the whole time? That question alone was enough to make people nervous. Because if 50 Cent wasn't exaggerating, then years of dismissing his warnings weren't just oversight. They were denial. And denial usually exists to protect something bigger than comfort. That's when the focus shifted from Diddy himself to the environment around him. Who benefited from his power? Who lost when that power became risky? And who quietly stepped back before the collapse became public? Celebrity reactions were subtle but loud in their own way. Some rushed to emphasize independence, posting about self-made success and moving differently. Others leaned heavily into spirituality and vague messages about truth coming to light. A few deleted old posts altogether. None of that went unnoticed. When multiple people start cleaning digital footprints at the same time, the internet smells coordination whether it exists or not. And Hazel. Not relevant here. This was bigger. The speculation around the 7 unnamed celebrities became its own beast. Fans started building lists like it was fantasy football nobody wanted to win. Names got floated, retracted, floated again. Entire fan bases went into defensive mode, swearing their favorite celebrity would never be involved in something like that. But the uncomfortable truth is that setups don't always look like villains twirling mustaches. They look like silence, distance, strategic absence. That's what made Katt's claim so explosive. It wasn't about criminal masterminds. It was about withdrawal of loyalty. About moments when protection quietly disappears. About knowing when to step aside so the fall looks natural. Hollywood has mastered that art, and that's why this felt believable enough to terrify people. Public outrage didn't have a single direction. Some demanded names immediately, accusing Katt of teasing without proof. Others argued that naming names would put him in danger, which only added to the mystique. The louder the debate got, the clearer it became that people weren't chasing truth, they were chasing closure. And closure doesn't exist in situations like this. The internet also split on Diddy himself. Some saw him as a villain finally exposed. Others saw him as a powerful figure being sacrificed once the cost of association outweighed the benefits. That's the dangerous gray area scandals like this live in. Two things can be true at once. Someone can be responsible for their actions and be strategically abandoned by allies when the heat gets too intense, and Hollywood understands that duality better than anyone. This phase revealed something deeply unsettling. Celebrity loyalty is conditional, temporary, and constantly renegotiated. Nobody stands with you forever. They stand with you while it's safe. Once it's not, the exits get quiet and the smiles disappear. Katt Williams didn't invent that idea. He just said it out loud. As the noise grew, the story mutated again. Think pieces popped up dissecting industry betrayal culture. Reaction channels framed it as a masterclass in power dynamics. Armchair analysts debated whether this was exposure or exploitation. Meanwhile, the people closest to the story said nothing, which only amplified the tension. Silence became its own headline. By the end of this stage, the narrative had fully escaped anyone's control. It wasn't about whether Katt would name the 7 celebs. It was about what his claim had already done. It introduced paranoia. And paranoia doesn't need confirmation to spread. It just needs possibility. Hollywood wasn't denying. The internet wasn't satisfied. And Diddy's name sat at the center of a storm that no longer needed new information to stay alive. Because once people start asking who pulled the strings, they never stop looking at the hands. This is the part of the story that never trends the way the explosion does. But it's the part that actually changes careers. Once the shock of Katt Williams' claims faded from non-stop headlines, the industry didn't return to normal. It adjusted, quietly, carefully, and those adjustments revealed just how deep the ripple really went for Diddy. The aftermath wasn't just about allegations or optics, it was about isolation. Not the dramatic kind with press conferences and public fallout, but the subtle kind that hurts more in Hollywood. Calls slow down. Invitations dry up. Familiar faces stop checking in. The silence isn't hostile. It's cautious. And caution is the first sign that protection has been replaced by distance. This is where Katt's words felt less like provocation and more like a warning label, because Hollywood doesn't collapse people overnight unless it's profitable to do so. It erodes them slowly. It lets public opinion do the heavy lifting while insiders step back and watch the outcome. And whether Diddy's situation ends in vindication or validation of the accusations, one thing already happened: the shield cracked. Once that happens, it never fully repairs. Meanwhile, Katt Williams walked away from the moment looking exactly the same as he entered it. Unapologetic, unbothered, and strangely untouched. That's what made this phase even more unsettling.
He didn't backtrack. He didn't clarify.
He didn't soften his language. He let the statement exist and watched the industry scramble around it. That confidence mattered because it suggested he wasn't speaking off rumor. He was speaking off observation. And in Hollywood, observation is often more dangerous than accusation. Accusations can be denied. Patterns can't. Katt didn't need to name the 7 celebs publicly for the damage to be done. The implication alone forced everyone to reevaluate their proximity, their history, and their future moves. And then there was 50 Cent, the unexpected beneficiary of this entire narrative shift. For years, his warnings were treated like entertainment. Petty beef, internet antics, troll behavior. But once Katt framed him as early instead of crazy, the internet rewrote his role in real time. Suddenly, 50 wasn't stirring chaos. He was calling it out before it became safe to do so. And in hindsight, early truth tellers don't get apologies, they get quiet acknowledgement. That shift in perception didn't just vindicate 50 Cent. It embarrassed the people who dismissed him. Because now the question wasn't why does 50 keep talking? It became who ignored him and why. That's a dangerous pivot. As weeks passed, the industry entered a phase of strategic neutrality. Nobody rushed to defend Diddy publicly. Nobody rushed to condemn him either. The language became careful, vague, corporate. Statements about letting the legal process play out replaced personal loyalty. That's Hollywood's way of stepping back without admitting it's stepping back, and audiences noticed. Fans became less forgiving. Not because they suddenly knew more, but because uncertainty hardens suspicion. When people sense something is being managed instead of explained, they assume the worst. And that assumption sticks longer than any headline. The story didn't need daily updates anymore. It had embedded itself into public perception. What made this aftermath especially uncomfortable was how little closure existed. No list of 7 names. No dramatic reveal. No cinematic ending. Just tension hanging in the air like a paused argument nobody wants to restart, but nobody can forget. And unresolved tension is the most dangerous kind, because it turns every future interaction into a potential trigger. Every time Diddy's name appears now, it comes with an asterisk. Every time a celebrity distances themselves, people wonder why. Every time someone speaks vaguely about truth or exposure, the dots reconnect themselves. That's the cost of narratives like this. They don't end. They linger. This phase also exposed a deeper truth about Hollywood loyalty. It isn't built on morality. It's built on timing. The moment association becomes expensive, loyalty becomes optional. Katt didn't invent that rule. He just said it without flinching. And once someone says it out loud, everyone starts looking around to see who else knows it. By the time the dust settled, the biggest consequence wasn't cancellation, jail, or redemption. It was instability. The certainty that something fundamental had shifted. That alliances weren't as solid as they looked. That silence could be louder than statements. And that success doesn't protect you when the environment decides you're no longer worth defending. This wasn't the end of Diddy's story. It wasn't the climax of Katt's, and it wasn't the final vindication of 50 Cent. It was the moment the blueprint became visible. A blueprint where power is temporary. Loyalty is rented, and downfall doesn't require enemies, just patience and timing. And once that blueprint is recognized, nobody involved ever looks at the industry the same way again. The internet moved on, as it always does, but the shift remained. In perception, in caution, in the way names are mentioned with hesitation instead of celebration, because whether Katt Williams ever names those 7 celebs or not, the real damage has already been done. The illusion of unity cracked. The myth of permanent protection faded. If you made it all the way here, congratulations, you didn't just watch a story, you decoded one. And if your brain is still spinning trying to connect dots Hollywood swears don't exist, do one thing right now. Smash that like button like it's been quietly benefiting from the chaos this whole time. Don't hesitate. Let it feel the pressure. Now I need you in the comments, because this conversation is far from over. Do you believe Katt Williams was exposing a real setup? Or was he simply saying what the industry already whispers behind closed doors? And let's be honest, do you think 50 Cent was warning people for years? Or just playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers? Drop your theories, your hot takes, your "this is deeper than we think" moments. This comment section is the real investigation board. If you're new here, hit subscribe immediately. Not later. Not after the next scandal breaks. Right now. Because stories like this don't come with press releases, they surface suddenly, evolve fast, and disappear before most people even realize what they watched. Turn on notifications so when the next industry shockwave hits, you're already locked in. And remember, this channel doesn't just repeat headlines. We break patterns. We expose timing. We question silence. If a story feels too coordinated, too convenient, or too quiet for its own good, you'll see it dissected here. Because today it's Diddy, yesterday it was someone else. It's Diddy, yesterday it was someone else. Tomorrow, it's another untouchable name nobody expects to wobble. This isn't gossip. This isn't conspiracy theater. This is fame blueprint, where power, loyalty, and downfall get mapped out in real time.